for this.
İngilizce kanalından çıkış yapıyorum. Pazartesi, salı, çarşamba, perşembe, cuma, cumartesi, pazar. Domates, domates. Şener Şen. Domates. Domates.
Merhaba.
Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session called Culture and the Climate Emergency, Local Experiences Towards COP26, which, as you know, is part of the 4th UCLG Culture Summit being held in Izmir. Welcome, everyone, those of you in the room here in Izmir, those of you following us online. We look forward to a very intense and interesting, hopefully, session. And welcome very particularly as well to the range of speakers that will accompany us this afternoon in this discussion on culture and the climate emergency. As months and seasons advance and as different parts of the world experience droughts, floods, and major fires, we become more aware of the urgency of addressing the climate emergency and how this is an all-pervasive phenomenon, something that we cannot escape in any reflection on the present and the future of our society and our planet. Because sustainable development is not only about thinking about the future generations, but it's also about experiencing the transformations of the today and considering our responsibilities and our actions as of today. And that involves a wide range of areas of life, including, of course, what we do in the cultural field. This connection between culture and the environment forms one of the 9 areas of the Culture 21 Actions toolkit that was adopted at the first UCLG Culture Summit back in 2015 in Bilbao. Since then, at each edition of the Culture Summit, there has been some session that has analyzed the relation between culture, climate change, the climate emergency, and the environment, and which has allowed us to progressively reflect on the implications and the actions that can be adopted at the local level. A lot of these sessions have been done in partnership with other organizations, particularly ICOMOS and the Climate Heritage Network. And it is through this dialogue and this engagement and this collaboration, as well as through the voices of the many local governments that are engaging in this area, that we have progressively continued to learn in this field. Today we are pursuing that discussion, facing the horizon of COP26, the next climate summit, which, as you know, will be held in Glasgow next November. In parallel, the UCLG Committee on Culture, as a member of the Climate Heritage Network, has commissioned the coordinator of the Climate Heritage Network, Andrew Potts, who is with us today, to conduct a report on the role of culture in climate-resilient development. The session today will start with a presentation by Andrew on some of the initial findings of that report. He's our keynote speaker, and after that we will give the floor to several representatives of local governments and civil society organizations that will also tell us about this connection from their own experience. So we look forward to a very engaging session. I will just ask all speakers to try to keep to time as much as possible, because there's many contributions coming, and we are at the end of the day, and we will try to keep to time as much as possible. So I'll leave it here, and I'll now give the floor to Andrew Potts to do this initial keynote speech. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jordi, for that introduction, and thank you also to UCLG for using the opportunity of this 4th Culture Summit to spotlight the cultural dimensions of tackling both the causes and the effects of climate change, tackling the climate emergency. This is a good follow-on to the really groundbreaking conversation that we had 2 years ago in Buenos Aires at the third Culture Summit, where we laid the foundation for trying to mobilize cultural heritage for climate action. As Jordi said, for this opening talk, I've been asked to introduce you to this new report that the UCLG Culture Committee is issuing in partnership with the Climate Heritage Network. The report is entitled, "The Role of Culture in Climate Resilient Development." And this report is being issued in advance of COP26, the UN Climate Conference, which is expected to take place soon in November, early November, in Glasgow, UK. The basic premise of this report is that the world can no longer afford divergent sustainable development and climate action agendas, and that culture can play a valuable role in advancing a new, integrated, transformative agenda called climate resilient sustainable development. And we decided to use this talk to introduce today's session because the framework of the report really gets us into a number of topics that will end up being relevant when you hear from the other speakers about activities happening in localities all around the world. The framework of this report sort of sets the context for the connection between culture and climate action. I mentioned that this report is a partnership between UCLG and the Climate Heritage Network. So let me maybe just say something about the CHN. The CHN was launched in 2019 in Edinburgh, Scotland. It aims to bring together organizations that share an interest in spotlighting the cultural dimensions of the climate crisis, in scaling out and promoting culture-based solutions to climate change, and it aims to mobilize arts, culture, and heritage operators for climate action. UCLG was a founding member of the Climate Heritage Network. A founding member of the steering committee is Uclg, other founding members, ICOMOS, IFLA, and so it really tries to be an all-of-culture effort to bring a focus on to climate change. Also maybe to say something about COP26, this is going to be a quite important event. We know that the world is dangerously off course in meeting the ambitions of the Paris Agreement. We're not on track to mitigate the climate crisis. And this summit, this conference, COP26, will really be a moment where we'll find out if the governments of the world are serious about avoiding the worst impacts of climate change. We have been really trying to amplify cultural voices, demanding ambition and action, and to send those voices into Glasgow, into the COP. To help with that, the Climate Heritage Network has prepared a manifesto, a sign-on manifesto, that underscores cultural messages for the people in the COP negotiations. And not today, but next week, you'll be able to go online and add your name to that manifesto if you want, at the website culture@cop.com. So, it's also useful maybe to say that one of the founding ideas behind the CHN is the belief that cultural voices are too often missing from the climate debate. And so I want to ask you a question by show of hands, if you know the answer. How many of you come from cities where somebody from arts, culture, heritage is on the mayor's climate action team? If the mayor has a climate action team, is somebody from culture on the team? I see one hand. How many of you come from regions where culture is discussed in the region's climate action plan? Okay, two hands, maybe more than I expected. So you see the problem that culture has not been at the table enough. And at the same time, and I'm sure these two things are related, we have too many cultural operators, cultural institutions, and culture agencies in government that are operating as if there were no climate crisis at all. Oblivious, I guess, to this existential threat to people and their culture. We each have a choice. Each of us in this room has a choice in our culture work. We can either be a part of the solution to climate change or not be a part of the solution. And the scary thing about that second option, the idea of not being a part of the solution to climate change, is it's very easy to make this choice because all it requires is doing whatever you've always been doing. All it requires is business as usual. It's business as usual that has given us the climate crisis. Business as usual is the opposite of climate action. And this observation I'm making, this is not just my rhetoric, this is climate science. Maybe you saw in the newspapers that the United Nations main climate science body, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, issued a new report a few weeks ago entitled Climate Change 2021. Now for starters, and this is quite alarming, in the report, the climate scientists found that some of the effects of climate change, including sea level rise, at this point are essentially irreversible. That we have triggered climate change that we cannot undo no matter how much carbon we mitigate going forward. And so those changes are changes that we're going to have to adapt to because we can't undo them. We can't make the seas stop rising. We can't reverse polar melt at this point. But the report also found that some of the worst impacts of climate change can still be mitigated, but only if we make deep, rapid cuts in greenhouse gas emissions, which are, of course, the cause of anthropogenic climate change. Climate science tells us that 1.5 degrees of global warming over pre-industrial levels will severely damage our natural and cultural heritage. But the impacts of, say, 2 degrees of warming will be significantly worse. So how do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions enough to hold global warming to 1.5 degrees? Climate science tells us that this requires rapid and far-reaching transitions in land, energy, industry, buildings, transport, cities, basically every facet of society. Rapid and far-reaching change. So transformative change, not business as usual, not incremental change, but systemic change. And by systemic change, I mean actions that not just adapt to climate change impacts, but which challenge the economic systems and social structures, the beliefs and the behaviors that contributed to climate change in the first place and which cause social vulnerability. And so this brings me to the topic of sustainable development. It is, of course, a founding mission of the Culture Committee of UCLG to promote culture as the fourth pillar of sustainable development. But note also that the principle of ecological transition in the UCLG Durban Political Declaration, in UCLG manifestos like Ecology for the Future of Culture, and the Future of Resilience, and I note the commitments of the Pact for the Future to be shaped by UCLG in 2021 and 2022. Taken together, these doctrines make clear that sustainable development is only possible when we consider the current and potential impacts of climate change. So we're looking at this intersection between the aspiration for sustainable development and the climate crisis. And this intersection is corroborated by climate science itself. Just a few other findings from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. One, climate change poses risks to health, livelihood, food security, water supply, human security, and economic growth, and these risks are greater with global warming of 2 degrees than with global warming of 1.5 degrees. Also, climate adaptation and mitigation options have benefits for sustainable development and poverty reduction. Many strategies that advance climate change mitigation and adaptation also deliver sustainable development. Sustainable development supports and often enables the fundamental societal and systems transitions that will help limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. And then lastly, and I think this is fascinating, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change found, and I'm quoting here, the large majority of modeling studies could not construct any pathway characterized by a lack of international cooperation, inequality, and poverty, where we were also able to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. Cannot achieve climate transformation without tackling poverty and sustainable development. And so climate action and sustainable development go hand in hand. The good news is that culture can help. Many of our aims in culture are fundamentally synergistic with the aims of climate action, with climate resilient development. This includes supporting a multiplicity of social networks and a diversity of knowledge systems. It includes the fact that culture fosters interconnectedness, but also embodies endogenous capacities of communities that promote local self-sufficiency, use of local materials, and local know-how. Guiding transformative change requires understanding how humans relate to places and things. It benefits from knowing how humans have responded to past social and environmental change. Tackling climate change demands circular economy approaches that promote the reuse and conservation of resources. It demands information, creativity, inspiration, cultural capital. In other words, it demands the things that we are good at in the culture sector. So climate action needs us. This new report that UCLG and the Climate Heritage Network are issuing tries to explore the role of culture and heritage in these pathways, which are called climate resilient development pathways, that simultaneously pursue the dual goal of transformative climate action while strengthening sustainable development. Our aim is to provide insights into how cultural actors can support climate resilient development and achieve a 1.5 degrees world. At the heart of this report is a series of 31 case studies. These are contributions from cities and local and regional governments, as well as partners, of actions that illustrate culture-based strategies that pursue these dual goals of transformative climate action and strengthening sustainable development. And I want to note that one of these case studies is from our host from Izmir. It's a project called the Rehabilitation of the 848th Street and Restoration of the Ahmet Aga Mansion, a restoration project that combines conservation, sustainability, and energy efficiency in the historic fabric. So you might try to see this while you're in Izmir. So we're in the process right now of synthesizing the lessons learned from these case studies, but I want to very, very quickly, as a teaser for the real report, just mention some of the things we're finding. One, we in the culture sector cannot ignore greenhouse gas emissions. We have to understand our own carbon footprint. We have to understand how culture can contribute to decarbonizing other sectors. We need to be able to count the carbon atoms of what we do and the carbon we avoid through culture strategies. Second, we in culture need to understand the climate-related stresses and hazards our communities face and the vulnerabilities of our populations to those hazards. How can you design a culture-based resilience strategy if you don't know resilient to what? How much more is it going to rain where you live? How hotter is it going to be? Have you looked at a downscaled climate model? Third, we have to make new partners. First, with climate. Every culture actor, every cultural agency, every NGO, every institution should have some connection to climate scientists, climate policymakers, climate activists, not to mention sectoral collaborations with people working in climate action in buildings, in agriculture, in mobility, so new partnerships. Fourth, attention to equity. Equity has always been indispensable to our notion in the culture sector of sustainable development, but now climate change gives us the new dimension of climate justice, that many marginalized communities that have contributed the least to the climate crisis are on the front lines of the impacts. And so this gives us a new focus. We also have the issue of just transition. Transformation is disruptive. Some people will be asked to give up more than others. Consider a family with a multi-generational tradition of coal mining, for example. So how do we support a fair transition for the people that are most impacted by the ecological transformation? Also have to consider loss and damage. We're not going to be able to prevent every cultural tradition, every monument from being damaged by climate change. And so how do we start to prepare our communities for loss from climate change? And lastly, we need to focus on synergies. What are the strategies we can pursue that both advance climate action, support sustainable development, and conserve and promote culture? Win-win-win strategies. Those are things we should prioritize. At the same time, we have to prepare for trade-offs. Several speakers have already spoken about the need for change, for loss, for transformation, and these are going to impact cultural heritage safeguarding, cultural promotion, at least as we conventionally understand them. So we have to engage with this idea of giving some things up, of trade-offs. So just in conclusion, I have to raise again the urgency of this issue. According to the 2020 UN Environment Emissions Gap Report, the world is on course for, do you know the answer to this? Not 1.5 degrees of warming, not 2 degrees of warming like the Paris Agreement seeks, but 3 degrees of warming. This amount of warming would be catastrophic. Many communities cannot adapt to 3 degrees of warming. So we've been tackling climate change for years now. What haven't we tried? Who's been missing from the climate action team? In so many cases, what's been missing is culture. The voice of culture has been missing from the world's climate action team. Our skills are useful. We're needed. So let's make holding global warming to below 1.5 degrees an explicit goal of our culture work. Let's have culture actors at the seat of the climate table. Let's lead the integration of sustainable development and climate action. When it comes to the climate emergency, please count culture in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for this excellent introduction to the topics we are addressing, that need for a transformative and systemic change, but also for highlighting the fact that a lot of the things that the culture sector is good at are some of that which is needed, and of course then setting the homework and what should be on our agenda for the years to come. Andrew was mentioning Uclg as one of the partners of the founding members of the Climate Heritage Network, and our next speaker is a member of the Global Executive Committee of Uclg, but she's also and primarily the mayor of Bonn, Ms. Katja Dörner, who will address us with a video message. So we will give her the floor via the video. And basically the question that we've put to her is what is in her view the role of arts, culture and heritage in supporting climate resilient development pathways? Yeah, I think it's being addressed.
And music play their part. Excellencies, esteemed fellow leaders in Turkey and around the world. I would like to thank United Cities and Local Governments, President Butra, Mayor Soya and the city of Izmir for hosting the UCLG Culture Summit and for inviting me to speak today. Culture expresses and embodies the very essence of human societies, preserved over millennia through cultural heritage, both material and immaterial. Culture can also be a powerful instrument and a driver of change. This is exactly what is needed at this pivotal moment in time. Art and music play their part. Let me remind you of the pastoral project initiated by Bonn in 2017, inviting artists all over the world to become inspired by Ludwig van Beethoven and his infinite passion for nature. This project attracted endorsements from the Mayor of Izmir, the UCLG Culture Committee and the Climate Heritage Network. Our self-understanding and our interaction with the planet on which we live is part of our cultural identity. Cultural identities grow and are shaped with time and with change, which needs to be driven. The latest IPCC report makes it crystal clear. No city, region, community or country can continue with business as usual. To get a world that keeps global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, a culture of sustainability shaped by social innovation has to evolve. A culture that leads to rapid collective transformation guided by Uclg's 5 pathways for low-emission, resilient, circular, nature-based and equitable development along the way. More and more cities, including Izmir and Bonn, are embracing this transformative culture of living in harmony with climate and nature, their sustainability strategies filling it with life. I'd like to congratulate Mayor Soya, my co-leader on climate action in the Uclg GEXCOM, for placing the climate emergency and eco-friendly lifestyles at the core of this year's cultural summit. Also, from an Uclg perspective, I commend Uclg for their perseverance on proposing culture as the fourth pillar of sustainability development, essential in transforming our cities, regions and communities in the age of multiple emergencies. In our capacity as a focal point of local and regional governments in climate change, biodiversity and desertification processes, on behalf of the Global Task Force, Uclg will gladly play a role in disseminating the outcomes of this Uclg Cultural Summit in Izmir. The next stop on the road to COP26 in Glasgow will be the Daring Cities on 4th to 8 October. This global forum of urban leaders tackling the climate emergency will be jointly hosted by Uclg and the city of Bonn. Uclg also endorses the COP26 manifesto of the Climate Heritage Network as a valuable contribution to the LGMA roadmap to Glasgow, promoting multi-level action beyond COP26 as the new normal in the second phase of the Paris Climate Agreement. As a pioneering and responsible city in Germany and the EU, and especially as a home of UN Bonn and the Climate Secretariat for the past 25 years, Bonn is demonstrating climate ambition and climate action. Bonn's commitment to climate neutrality by 2035 stands strong, jointly driven by our citizens and my administration. Our citizen-driven Bonn for Future initiative is working on innovative ways to achieve a climate-neutral Bonn, notably in the fields of mobility and renewable energy. Culture of innovation is evolving, and that is exactly what we need. Let me encourage cities around the world to embrace this new culture.
Thank you very much, Mayor Dorner, for passing on this message of encouragement and on behalf of Uclg and other organizations. And as Mayor Dorner was suggesting, there's a lot of action that is happening at the local level and much more that can continue to happen. So we will continue this exploration of how different cities are addressing this nexus between culture and climate action by giving the floor now to Ms. Fatma Kaplan-Hurriyet, the mayor of Izmit. Ms. Kaplan has a background as a lawyer. She was first elected to the National Assembly in Turkey on behalf of Kocaeli in 2015, and she's the mayor of Izmit since 2019. And we've asked her about the local initiatives that better illustrate culture-based sustainable development and the advance of climate change action and how this can be correlated to the SDGs. So Ms. Kaplan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear participants, I would like to say hello to everyone. Thank you to everyone that has been the supporter for this beautiful summit. I would also like to celebrate the Independence Day of Izmir. Dear participants, first of all, there are fires that have been continuing on the south and floods on the north, and due to these disasters, I would like to remember all the lives that have been lost. In Paris in 2015, the last UN climate summit, the climate summit and its results have been shown, and this was a call from the nature. Mother Nature is trying to remind the people that have forgotten that they're part of itself, and we are starting to hear this warning in a very bitter way in terms of fight against climate change. There's economical changes, but there's also cultural factors, and we tend to forget this fact. However, culture is a lifestyle that we form, and our lifestyle right now is not sustainable, not protective, and it is not environment friendly. In this summit, it is important to pay attention to these aspects, and the new steps should consist of methods that create environmental friendly methods. Protecting the nature, protecting humor, protect children, women, animals, the earth. These protective idea should be the consensus. It should be acknowledged by the world. Uclg should thanks to Uclg for trying to put culture in the center. If we can heal the nature, we can heal ourselves, and that's why we need to reconsider our lifestyle. Izmir is a global industry city, and I've been the mayor of the city for 3 years. On the local scale, we have seen results, and I would like to share how we have reached results by using culture. It is a production city, and Kocaeli is the center district, and it is also the economical center and the life center. The carbon footprint, unfortunately, Izmir is, in terms of carbon footprint, is a leading city, and 70% of Izmir is rural areas, and we think that this will benefit our fight against the carbon footprint that Izmir is producing, and we consider these rural areas as an advantage, and we make very concrete works regarding these areas. These areas have a richness that they have gathered through history and through migrations.
As the Izmir municipality, with this awareness, we would like to exhibit the rural culture, and we are trying to make a research about how this cultural heritage could be exhibited, could be shown. And while they're telling us about this, they know that how valuable that cultural heritage is. And another intangible cultural heritage is the weaving silk rugs, silk carpets, and the women are trying to make that so that they can make a living out of this, and we are trying to grow silkworms so that they can have more silk to weave these the rugs. And also for tangible products, for fields of agriculture, for the areas of agriculture, we are trying to plant them in Izmir villages, how we can make use of these areas. We have some trial areas. This is the Nusrat local seed. This is the local wheat seed for Izmit soil and climate, and it is harvested. And also from the gardens, from the fruit gardens, from the orchards, we are trying to share the products with others. And also we're trying to include children for these activities in order to create a cultural awareness and in order to protect the water sources and soil. We are trying to create an awareness, and also we are trying to sell the products that we produced in our villages without anybody in between. And also we have this good for trust in order to support circular economy. We created an e-trade, e-commerce platform for local producers of Izmit, and we're trying to provide a more effective market. And with Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, local producers of Izmit have been meeting with the producers. And for waste management, adults and children are awarded for collecting waste, and waste is in fact a national treasure. So we're trying to manage it, and we have the Children's Award Market. We're trying to contribute to waste management and recovery and recycling. And the upgraded gardens, the high gardens, and the landscape and forest school. So we're trying to create activities, tangible activities for future and renovation and recycling. And another activity is Çınar waste, the electronic wastes, to use them. So the Çınar waste announcement of the campaign to transform electronic waste into saplings. So these are some examples, and with an application you can find where the nearest application point, and then it is encouraging the recycling as well. And with this application, we applied to the Uclg for the inspiring projects, and in more than 125 countries, and there are local authorities representatives, and this project has been shared with those cities and local authorities, and we would like to have your endorsement as well. And also cultural development is important for us, and I would like to share this with you. Izmit, before Istanbul, has been a capital for Roman Empire, and it has been one of the most important cities at that time. And the protection culture, history, and its experiences, we are trying to, Nicosia was the old name, and we have a protocol signed with the Ministry of Culture in order to protect the identity of that old city. And Santa Barbara has given to many cities in the world, but that Santa Barbara has lived in Izmir and died in Izmir, and we know that Santa Barbara was a very important saint for the Christian world, and we are trying to tell about her story as well, and that historic story, and we're trying to protect nature and all these protective mechanisms, to trigger all these mechanisms that we're trying to do. And with these activities, within the goals of SDGs, hunger and sustainability and responsible consumption and production goals are being addressed in the long run, and we think that it's an important policy document, political document, and this report that I have mentioned. And what's prominent here is that long discussions and real promises that can be kept have been discussed, and they're going to be, I hope they're going to be linked to the concrete reality and concrete applications. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Teşekkürler, Mayor, and thanks for introducing the work done by SMIT in areas like intangible cultural heritage and the power of local and traditional knowledge to rethink our relation with the environment. We'll now go back online to a presentation by Julian Polanco from the State Historic Preservation Office of California, and someone who has actively been involved in aspects of connecting work around cultural heritage and climate action. So I believe Julian is online on Zoom. Hi. And we would like to invite you to discuss, on the one hand, to explain what's the role of the State Historic Preservation Office in California and or how it is contributing to mitigate and adapt to climate change, and also with a view to COP26, how you think the cultural sector can participate in that context. So Julian, the floor is yours. We cannot hear you, and I'm not sure if it's an issue of being muted or if it's here. I think for people in the room, we cannot hear her. So I don't know if we can hear her online, but yeah, but for the people here. Okay. Yeah, can you speak again? Sorry, for those of you following online, we're trying to check what's going on here. Sorry, can you speak again? Juliana, can you hear us? Yeah, could you speak now? No, sorry. The problem here continues. So apologies for this. Okay, so yeah, apologies for this. So they're trying to solve some technical issue that prevents sound from the online session to arrive here. So in the meantime, we'll move on to the next speakers who are here in the room, and hopefully the issue will be solved. So sorry, Julian, for this, but hopefully we'll yeah, in a few minutes it will work. So I will now give the floor to Dr. Güven Eken, who's the counselor to the mayor of Izmir and the chairman of the executive board of Izdoga Inc., incorporated in Izmir. And the question that we would like him to address is how Izmir is addressing climate challenges from a cultural perspective. So Dr. Eken, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. The speech before me included a very concrete example, and after me, Dr. Koray Velibeyoğlu will be talking about the tangible results of our work with Izmir's climate change. And now I will talk about intangible issues. I will be pointing out certain aspects that will make things a little bit clearer. I have a few slides, and until they're ready, I will start explaining. Here is my slide. There are some basic concepts, and I will be talking about these because we already discuss all over the world about what we should do. This is a sick planet with its most basic way that we can describe. And what do we need to do in order for the sick planet to heal? I want to focus on how we can do this and not what we can do. First of all, I want to elaborate on a concept. It is called loneliness of a species. And when we talk about loneliness, we think about not having friends, not having family, feeling alone, and feeling far away. I have another description of a loneliness. It's the loneliness of a species, because there are billions of species that we know and that we don't know of, and they don't carry the feeling of this loneliness that we feel. And usually our friends, our families, people we know and don't know, and when we look at these, me, you, and they are the first foundations in the world of our thoughts, in our thought process. And when we look at the world as carrying pillars, we see ourselves, or the persons, yourselves, and we fill in these gaps based on these concepts of I, you, and they. And of course, there are relationships between these identities, but of course the nature of nature works in a different way, and I will try to explain a little bit. And I, you, they, and we have relationships, and they make a people, they make humanity, and they make a group. And there's also ecology, nature that is outside of us as an outer subject. There is Earth, there is universe, and of course we have a connection with this outer aspects. And I have 2 minutes. All right, I have 2 minutes left. Apparently, I only talked for 2 minutes, and my speech was longer than 4 minutes. I had a 15-minute speech that I've prepared before.
Information that was sent to speakers, I think you are given between 3 and 5 minutes. That's the information I've received.
Yes, that's correct, actually. Like 4 or 5 minutes per speaker. Apologies.
Yeah. Sorry if there has been a misunderstanding.
Sorry for you. Peki birkaç temel kavram anlatıp yerime geçeyim o zaman.
Okay, sure. That's fine. His minute as well and continue.
Yok gerek yok öyle bir şey. Peki.
All right, I will continue. And where was I? We have a connection with Earth, and even though this is a weak connection, we see the subjects itself. What we see are objects, we see things, but when we look at climate change that the world is going through, and when we try to conceptualize it, we need a world of thought that is creating a connection between these. When we with our thought process that is making pandemic and climate change an existence, we are trying to change the consequences. However, we need to accept the fact that this is another type of science, another type of art, another type of culture, and it's not exactly different, because what I'm talking about different is something that continues to be lived through all over the world. And right now, what we take as a foundation, this type of relation, is a cumulative relation. For example, when we talk about richness, it's the individuals, all the family getting richer, getting more money, or getting more houses. This is what we understand. However, in this village, this is Muğla's Taşlıca village, richness doesn't exist. People base their thoughts on a different concept, which is fertility. And there is a difference between richness and fertility. Richness belongs to an individual, but fertility is a concept that talks about the wellness between relationships. And this is a very concrete concept, because they're looking at the world through the perspective of fertility. When they're planting seeds, they're also accepting the fact that these will be consumed by birds, wolves, humans. This means that they will give to nature and take from nature as well. If we're taking one thing from nature, we need to give back two. And the people in this village have this philosophy, and this is a very important perspective. Another thing is the idea of nature and a thought of nature. Other than the relationship with our nature, nature can also think, nature can also create, and other cultures have also wrote about this and understood this. You know, the two-head eagle, it has two heads, one body, and when you look at Anatolia and ancient geographies, you see this two-headed character a lot of times, and two-headed eagle actually shows that eagle is a very strong creature, right? It doesn't need anything. It can catch a rabbit on its own. But an eagle that has two heads shows that in the reality of the thing is that power is not about physical power. It's about mind. For example, Anatolian culture has Nasrettin Hoca, who rides the donkey backwards, and this is another symbol. We can only determine where we are and our pace. We can't determine our direction, and when we try to determine our direction, we start a conflict with nature. Or in Çatalhöyük, there is a goddess. You can see that this goddess is being weighted by different animals, and even the goddess needs protection from the nature, needs harmony with nature. And this shows that this idea, this paradoxical idea, is a reflection of the relationship between human and nature. And I would also like to talk about the culture of nature. For us, speciesism is a fact that humans are above all other creatures, and we think that we are above all creatures. However, there are creatures that don't think this way. And for example, in our country, we have a saying that says, water flows for no reason. And this means that this is not possible, because without water flowing, there won't be humans, there won't be nature. So it doesn't flow as a waste. It has a purpose. And I want to put together all these three concepts. It is not an easy job in our world. We need a different thought process that consists of culture,
so if we cannot just take that circular culture, circular system into consideration, we cannot get rid of any issues in the world, hunger, wars, and these challenges all are the human being's mistake that separated itself from or himself, herself from the nature. So being ill, being sick, meaning that if you want to recover, you need to fully wish to recover. But if your mind does not want to get sick and your hands are happy with the sickness, meaning you cannot get rid of that sickness, because if in the nature everything as a whole, then we need to get together to have the common wish of recovering. Then we can recover. So everyone all together, if we all want to recover, to get well, we can recover the world that we made sick. So thank you to everyone who participated and who organized this valuable activity. I know that I have just overpassed my time, but I'm really sorry, but thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eken. We'll give the floor briefly to Associate Professor Koray Veliveyoglu from the Izmir Institute of Technology to complete the reflection on how Izmir is addressing climate challenges.
Teşekkür ederim.
Thank you very much. In 3 minutes, I will be talking about what Izmir has been doing about climate crisis and culture. But in fact, Izmir has put it in one place. That is the report that has been distributed, this review report in this book, and 17 SDGs. And from the aspect of Izmir, how it has been reviewed, it has been published. And apart from 17 goals, there are 3 different topics. One is culture, because as we all know, within the 17 goals, this has been mentioned minimally. And the human rights, the second topic, because without human rights, this transformation cannot be realized. And the third one, of course, is digital democracy. And the third one is the technological communication tools, how they affect our daily lives. And these 17 goals, and then these 3 pillars also have been showing the goals of Izmir. And another example, a concrete example, what Dr. Eken has mentioned, that with the development and culture, how we can link them. I would like to talk about an experiment. The name of it is Through Cultural Heritage, Creating the Transformation and Change. This is within the Horizon 2020 project. Rural heritage, a word has been created, and within this project, as Izmir is an implementer, and also UNESCO is within that, and what it has been tried to do, the actions that we have been trying to take. If I talk about them, I could give you some info about context. One of them is geological heritage, because it's one part of cultural heritage and culture, because it's like a mortar, like a glue. And the second one is bioeconomy. It's really important because the new livelihoods should be added. And the third one is music culture. The culture and music within this geography, documenting and digitalizing it. And the fourth area, our mayor of Izmit has also mentioned, the forest school. And this project is going to go on. And forgotten masonry, like weaving baskets. And when we look at the other dimensions, the Transportation, because transportation should be integrated, because it should be mobility should be integrated. And for Izmir, we have Eurovela network, and Eurovela 8, Izmir is in it, and that's the bicycle tourism network. And this project is also going to adapt and harmonize with it. And also, Izmir's tourism strategy based on culture as a brand name. The area where the project takes place is Kozak Plateau, and we are trying to make that area as a brand. And lastly, culture includes helping each other. And we have a project of distributed in different places, hotels, locating hotels in different places. And while protecting their lifestyles in that region, hotels are going to be built. And even these actions taking place in this project shows that culture has a vital role, and a life integrated with culture can be sustainable. It shows us that. And we are in it, and in the last 2-3 years, we're getting our fruits from that. Thank you very much. That's the end of my speech. Thank you, Profesör Veli Beyoğlu, Koray Veli Beyoğlu. Evet, bu sunumları, yerel deneyimlerle ilgili sunumları tamamlamış olduk İzmit'teki de. Ve şimdi tekrar online bağlantıyı gerçekleştirmeye çalışacağız. Julian Polanco, Kaliforniya Kültürel Miras. Günaydın.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, it's working now. Yeah, thank you.
Very well.
Thank you. So welcome and thanks for your patience. As we've mentioned earlier, Julian Polanco is here representing the State Historic Preservation Office of California, and we would like to ask her to tell us about their work in contributing to mitigating and adapting to climate change, as well as some reflections with a view to the COP26 summit.
Good morning, and thank you to everybody for your participation, and it's an honor to be with you today. I come to you from Marin County, California, where I respectfully acknowledge that I'm on the traditional homeland of the Coast Miwok people, many of whom today are tribal citizens of the Federated Indians of the Great Rancheria. As you all have been watching the news, California has already started its unprecedented wildfire season. In the last 2 weeks, we've already experienced more than 2 million acres burned, of a total of 4 million last year. And the calculation of that is about 55 million tons of greenhouse gas to date, not to mention the damage to the forests and the other and fauna and the other associated risks. Rainfall has been decreasing in California, and with the onset of the pandemic, our landscape, both in the state and globally, as we all have been experiencing, has changed. So how is California looking at climate change and adapting and mitigating the effects of greenhouse gas in these times? There are two primary documents that we use as our guideposts. The first is called an adaptation strategy. It was formerly called Safeguarding California. That document is a list of all the state's ambition. These ambitions and these efforts also work in conjunction with non-governmental organizations, local governments, and other partners to address the different things in air, water, waste to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement to reduce greenhouse gas and keep the temperature below 2 degrees Celsius. Our Office of Historic Preservation specifically is working with a California Cultural Resources Climate Change Task Force initiative, in which we understand, have gathered all of the ambitions of the state agencies and the different multimedia, and used the ICOMOS's Future of Our Past report that talks about how and the intersections of culture and climate change, and really have taken the last 2 years to do a deep dive into the ambitions of the state, our programs and our processes, to identify areas in which synergies, collaborative efforts can increase ambition, where culture can help change behaviors for the public, and also add an element of layer with traditional ecological knowledge to think about the way in which the loss of resources affects communities and indigenous peoples. The effort is in its analysis stage, and within the next year, we expect to be producing future policies that will allow us to understand better how to make those connections on a more sustainable level in order to help our communities in face of these challenges that are ever increasing. The state has also committed to a 30% conservation of lands by 2030, and that is that global effort that's happening. We've signed on with a document that we're currently creating that's a natural and working lands report. It will be the ambition of the state to understand how conserving land, active working lands, and natural set-aside land, parks adjacent to cities in particular, waterways, where co-management examples also will be a part of that plan. So how is California going to get there in these two different plans? Some of the projects that we're working on specifically in the co-management phase at a World Heritage listed site in the California Redwoods in northern part of the state, there's a co-management plan with the Uclg tribe, the California State Parks Department, and the U.S. Forest Service, and also the Federal National Park System called Redwoods Rising. And it just received an $11.5 million budget increase for this year to really understand how those co-management and prescriptive burn practices can be a model for forest management throughout the state and globally. The second example that we're focusing on as part of these two efforts is to take the natural environment's climate vulnerability index assessment process and infuse culture, indigenous community, and adjacent community values to understand and derive a more holistic definition to then do the scientific dive into climate threats, what are the social modulators, how we might better understand and steward values such as tribal subsistence practice for traditional health and resiliency. These outcomes that we're seeing from these efforts will be something that we will be putting together in a results package in an effort to really help with the urgency and the ambition and use them as models, not just for our own state and our local communities, but hopefully on a national and global basis. We're working with some other partners in the UK and Australia with ECOMOS and the Climate Heritage Network on climate vulnerability assessments that are happening in Africa and Scotland to really understand the different models that can be used globally to increase that ambition. The outcomes need to be inclusive. We are trying to find ways to create those synergies and build capacity to sustain communities into the future. How is that happening then with the Climate Heritage Network, and what are the options that we're looking at in the lead up to COP?
Briefly, if possible. So
yes, as Andrew mentioned earlier, there are opportunities with the Madrid-Glasgow Plan, Arts, Culture and Heritage, and Climate Action that center around carbon calculators, indigenous communities, and changing the power parity. And then he also mentioned the manifesto. We were launching a cultureatcop.com website where we invite people to list any culture activities centered around COP. We hope it'll be a place where people can go and find out what's happening. This Climate Heritage Network also has some other options and a whole host of seminars that will be centered around COP and involved in COP, and we invite you to join us. And that again is cultureatcop.com. Thank you so much for everything today, and good luck with the rest of the conference.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julian. Yeah, thank you very much for this overview of the range of actions being implemented, as well as some of the ideas going forward towards COP26. And we're continuing online and moving now to Leeds in the UK. And we'll give the floor to Anne Wishart and Lisa Broadest, who are Arts Development Managers in Leeds. And we would like to invite them to reflect on how Leeds is addressing climate challenges from a cultural perspective.
Hello everyone, I hope our slides are up on the screen and everyone can hear me. Is that okay? Thumbs up?
Yes, all good. Thank you.
That is great. So yes, I am Anne Wishart and I'm the Arts Development Manager for Leeds City Council, and our ambition for Leeds is to be carbon neutral by 2030. We have virtually eliminated household waste going to landfill, and instead Leeds household waste that can't be recycled is going to power our district heating network. This provides affordable, low carbon heat to almost 2,000 homes and businesses, including our own cultural venues and several arts organisations in the area. Working with arts and cultural organisations across the city, we are supporting renovations to their buildings, and regionally we are supporting a new mass transport system and exploring ways to address food and waste across the cultural sector. Next slide. Our cultural strategy was designed in 2017 to cover from 2000.
Excuse me, I don't know if there's slides, but we don't see them. At least not those of us in the room. I'm not sure if those on Zoom can see them. No? So yeah, I don't know if there's, oh, sorry, now we have the presentation. Okay.
If we can go to slide 3, that would be
great.
So
you are by slide 3. Okay, can we?
Yes.
Okay, great.
That's the one.
Excellent. Thank
Thanks. And oh, you can all see them. That's great. So our cultural strategy is designed to cover 2017 to 2030, and we're now at the next part of the delivery framework, which will support these areas. A hive of creative innovation, children, families, and young people. How we support being international and internationalism, and Leeds 2023, our year of celebration of culture. Next slide. Underpinning the above objectives are 3 cost-cutting themes: equality and inclusion, and environmental sustainability, maximising our impact. So we should have been on the next slide. If we can move to the slide after that, to slide 5 now. And I'm going to hand over to Lisa Broadest.
Thank you very much, Anne. I'm Lisa Broadest. I'm Head of Operations for Leeds Museums and Galleries. Leeds Museums and Galleries is the largest local authority-run museum service in England, and our values are rooted in kindness, belonging, creativity, shared community and sustainability, social, economic and environmental. Our vision is to share stories from our past and present to shape a better future. This is delivered through a set of 5 strategic objectives. Whilst our approach has not been formally linked with the SDGs, there are close synergies with our work, particularly through our engagement and learning programmes across our 9 sites, and cuts across SDGs 3, 4, 10 and 13 amongst others. Part of this approach has been to make the global local, relevant and to inspire social action. Opportunities have been and continue to be developed for audiences to get involved, be inspired, but also to challenge themselves. And examples of our work include our involvement with the Happy Museum peer learning programme No Going Back, supporting museums to draw on past stories of rapid transformation and transition to inspire museums and communities to shape new stories and actions to address the climate and ecological emergencies. A proposed redevelopment of the Life on Earth Gallery at Leeds City Museum to produce an engagement-rich gallery and cafe complex, inspiring visitors to value biodiversity. Our participation in the Urban Natures Project as part of the Real World Science Natural History Museum partnership. The delivery of an externally funded project, Dead Inspiring, using Leeds insect collections to empower women in science, funded by Museums Association and the Esme Fairbairn Collections Fund. We also support a number of gardening groups, including one in collaboration with a local environmental charity as part of their Outdoors Active and Wellbeing project. And we've delivered coding, conservation and collections microbit workshops to support sustainability in partnership with Leeds Libraries. This used Leeds Natural Science Collections to develop coding skills as part of the Do Your Bit Global Challenge from the BBC. This encouraged young people to learn coding while supporting the SDGs. Our annual report in 2019-20 brought together some of these case studies with a focus on how Leeds museums and galleries were and are supporting sustainability and biodiversity. And that's available to view on your website if of interest. Over recent years, Leeds Museums and Galleries exhibition programme has also addressed sustainability issues, and one of the most recent exhibitions was Natural Encounters at Leeds Art Gallery. This exhibition explored the important role that art plays as a tool for reflecting on current ecological issues, our own psyches and our ongoing relationship as a species with the natural world in which we inhabit. It also recognised, due to the pandemic, that our relationship with nature has been transformed on multiple levels. And in particular, lockdowns reminded audiences that access to nature is critical for our own mental and physical well-being and something that needs protecting. To accompany the exhibition, there was a digital public programme of free events for everyone, and one strong element linked to the service's youth collective, which is a youth group, with the encouragement to become an environmental art activist, along with opportunities to work with a variety of climate change youth organisations across the city. Hopefully, these examples that I've talked through this afternoon will aim to demonstrate culture-based initiatives for the city that also advances and raises awareness of the climate and biodiversity emergencies, which links to relevant action. I'll now hand you back to Anne. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm not
Anne,
sure
you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
if we can jump to slide 7, I just want to talk about one of the initiatives in Leeds called...
Just briefly, if possible.
Yes, called SAIL. It's called Sustainable Arts in Leeds. It's a not-for-profit membership network of organisations and individuals, creative and culture sector. And the network includes artists, scientists and activists. And as part of that, they have done what they call the CARA workshop, which is looking at how climate action readiness assessment Leeds are and the culture sector are to be net zero. So what they've done, they looked at technical, policy, financial, community and delivery, and over 40 organisations took part. From the assessment, they found that recurring themes that the network and organisations need resourcing to make change, they need to learn how to measure impact, and they need better communication tools and increased engagement. And some areas of the culture sector said there were limited motivation to change or act. So the solutions is, since then, SAIL has delivered carbon literacy training to over 86 people. They have worked with over 39 organisations, and we are currently in discussion with the Arts Council England and ourselves, Leeds City Council, for future funding and development. I could talk more, but I understand that we need to move on. So thank you for listening to Leeds.
Thank you very much, Anne and Lisa, for presenting this ambitious vision of Leeds as a carbon neutral city by 2030 and what that implies in terms of the practice and the developments within the cultural sector. So thank you very much for this presentation. And again, apologies also to everyone who's speaking, because we know we are forcing you to do a very synthesized snapshot of something that, of course, would deserve much more space. So thanks for doing this exercise in summarizing in any case. We're now continuing online and going to Rainer Kern from the city of Mannheim in Germany. Rainer is a representative of the mayor of Mannheim and a special advisor on global affairs and international networks, as well as the director of UNESCO City of Music, Mannheim, as well as several other involvement in as a senior advisor to the Global Parliament of Mayors, among other things. So Rainer, nice to have you with us today, and yeah, I would like to ask you to reflect on the role of the arts, culture and heritage in supporting climate resilience, as well as if you have any ideas with a view to the climate summit in Glasgow. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody, and thanks to everyone organizing this conference again, UCLG, the brave people in Izmir, and of course, especially to Jody Pascal, who is the best, of course, we know. I have been wondering for a while what thoughts I would like to share with you, what seems important to me in the given question that you just repeated, Jody. Admittedly, not only good thoughts have come to me. We have been talking for a long time about the importance of art, culture, and creativity for well-being, social inclusion, the integration of migrants, innovation, sustainability, and now climate change. But this is not a question of faith, as you all believe, but of scientific knowledge combined with experience. And Andrew said that in his very brilliant keynote and mentioned the IPCC. Nevertheless, culture and art are still not seen as both an opportunity and an obligation. But that is why we are meeting here, right? But I would like to go a little more into details, but also be more generalized, which sounds like a contradiction. And please allow me to also have a critical look on our subject here. What is the role of arts, culture, and heritage? That was a question you just repeated. I mean, we have to learn to think and act differently in systems that are becoming more and more complex and therefore more confusing and scary for most people who are not into the topics like we are. And that you know, and therefore we all think that the arts and culture, it's two different things, culture and arts, let's talk about the arts, can help in this regard. But well, now the pandemic crisis has shown us in a shocking way how high the value of art and culture is in our society, or rather it is amongst those in power. In Germany, it was and is a catastrophe. An entire sector is on the brink of collapse. What have we done wrong with our decades-long talk and promotion of creativity, art, and culture? Why have those responsible not used the power of art and creativity to overcome the pandemic, or have hardly used it at all, or only superficially? I'm very excited about this. Strangely enough, we think of a new, better future with old images, with old wordings. We imagine tomorrow with yesterday. In reality, this is unpromising concept finds its counterpart in the fact that we want to solve the new problems with our old systems. From a technical point of view, this is rather clueless. And from a creativity point of view, disarmingly unimaginative. With our dialogue, we have to get out of it, break through it, and art can help us. That's why we are meeting here. But we all know that already. In order to solve the climate disaster, we will fail with purely technical means. We think that. We must understand that the combination of art and innovation must be thought of together. Art, innovation, and technology, the three. Not either one of these fields alone can tackle. And that's what the IPCC's report said on many different other levels, but it's the same for this. Let me say something about art. And I was invited as a representative of the mayor of the city of Mannheim, and in my capacity as a cultural manager, to co-develop a new program within Harvard University, which is entitled Renaissance Now. As my presentation is not here, I guess, I'll just copy the link of that into the chat so you can see. So this is a program that tries to combine exactly these fields. And we think that art can and must be extreme, and the extreme has many forms. The extreme is important because the extreme is the permeable membrane to people's subconscious. And art can help people to learn how to deal with extremes, how to deal with themselves, and thus find new solutions. It is no use that we are all standing on one side of the ship now, which is why it is threatening to tip over and sink, and are now all running to the other side of the ship. That's not so easy. That's why it's important to have a tool like art that can have a look on complex systems and problems in a different way. And the other question was, how can the cultural sector participate in the climate summit in COP26? This is not a difficult answer for me. Artists need to be on the ground and intervene to shake things up, to inspire, to demand, to generate attention, to create a following, to open our eyes to innovation, and to build bridges to connect innovation, technology, policy, and civil society. Leave no one behind is the meta claim, and the zero-sum game is maybe the wrong wording, because in the definition of zero sum, which is from game theory, always someone is losing. That's the definition of zero sum. So our target level must be the policies level, the rulers, the decision makers. That is where our strategy of influence must start. Science, art, civil society, and policy must make common cause, overcome the divides. Otherwise, we will continue to promote our beautiful themes of art and creativity for the next decades, but only change them cosmetically. And that's why we think, that's why we were co-developing the Renaissance Now program with Harvard University from Mannheim. We think that the different fields we're talking about today, and Andrew and many others of you were talking about it, have to come together. And that means we must be careful when we talk about art and culture and whatsoever. We have to involve the artists to be part of the innovation and technical solution approaches. Otherwise, if one field is trying to solve it, what I said before, then we run on the other side of the ship, then it tackles down there. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Rainer, for the reflections, for the critical contribution, as well as for emphasizing that role of artists and some of the projects you are involved in. And finally, we'll give the floor to Alison Tickell, the founder and director of Julie's Bicycle, an organization based in the UK that has been at the vanguard of a lot of the reflections on resilience and addressing and adapting to climate change from the sector of culture and the arts. Alison, the question we'd like to put to you is, on the one hand, if you identify local or regional initiatives that illustrate culture-based sustainable development, as well as if there are, or if you identify any trade-offs or negative interactions between cultural safeguarding and climate action.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I will be brief, and I hope that I will answer that question as I go through. First of all, I want to just focus particularly on the arts and the creative industries as critical dimensions of culture, because seeking and speaking truths is fundamentally what the arts are about. Putting substance and form into values is fundamentally what culture is about, and designing all of this for an economy, a sustainable economy, is fundamentally what the creative industries are about. And we need to really hear about what are the vectors of change and sustainability, both on our national and our regional, our city and our local levels. And for me, particularly from a wealthy and historically extractive economy, we must take extra responsibility for generating an overwhelmingly dominant model. So much consumer culture is dependent on the creative economy. It drives desire and demand for often a very specific and value-laden lifestyle. This is problematic. So the solutions require a radical rethink in all aspects of the cultural economy, with an ambition and a style that mirrors the journey and the destination we're all on. And sadly to say, we have only just begun in that endeavour. Firstly, we need to agree that climate change is the challenge of our lives, and the whole of the creative sector needs to dedicate ourselves to that. Then we need to work together, to collaborate rather than to compete, to ensure that the best ideas, not the biggest marketing budgets, can be adopted at scale and speed. We need collective and fair targets and frameworks which are going to, at the very least, align with the science, and better aim for a regenerative creative ecology that puts back more than it takes. We need hyperlocal and sectoral experiences to speak to strategy, and we need to recognise that this crisis is built on past injustices, which means making way for new voices, new creative communities, new economies, and the restoration of indigenous, local and community knowledge. But all these ideas are already out there in the Sustainable Development Goals, in Net Zero, in the Green Deal, but they are too slow. They are already being co-opted, and they are too compromised, which is where we come in. A little bit about Julie's Bicycle, founded by the music industry in 2007. We are now working across arts and culture internationally. Julie's Bicycle has been mobilising the arts for 15 years, mobilising action, and that's such an important term, at all levels, from individual artists to policymakers, festivals, museums, theatres, grassroots to multinationals, we've been helping the arts and culture to translate this ecological crisis into practical tools, carbon calculators, guides, what needs to actually be done on the ground, which are now being adopted internationally. This is the only new cultural practice which needs to support the leadership the sector so desperately needs, because everything matters. Cultural policy is now behind. It must build on the work of creative pioneers to rapidly scale change, and we know it can work. In the UK, our national funding body, Arts Council England, which invests over 700 million euros, has developed the largest environmental literacy programme for culture anywhere in the world. So all funded organisations have to measure their impacts and have an active environmental policy. It has been hugely popular. It's been developed over 10 years. It's produced spectacular emissions reductions, which are in line with the science, new expertise and innovation. It tackles pretty much every aspect of culture, from materials to production to social engagement to the circular economy. Crucially, it has rejuvenated a sense of creative purpose and a much stronger connection to people and places. This very simple national policy has shown how a sustainable cultural sector might actually work. Julie's Bicycle has also worked with hundreds of organisations, cities and national cultural bodies, supporting conversations and creating tools for city officials from culture to talk to climate teams, working with such bodies as the World Cities Culture Forum and C40 to drive change. Because arts and culture matter to cities, to identities and to economies. We have over 5,000 creative companies from over 100 countries using the tools and resources and networking together to build this new body of change. There is no shortage of interest. So any policymakers out there from cities, it's all there. So very briefly, we've been researching the creative climate movement globally and found artists and creative pioneers everywhere, all over the world, bringing together issues of justice and equity with climate and ecology, most commonly grassroots communities and places. But we also found that these amazing people are too often fragile. Sometimes they are in danger themselves. They lack security, resource or recognition, and hard-won knowledge is easily lost. All the while, the complex and generous web of life is breaking. We have no time to lose. So Julie's Bicycle now runs creative climate leadership programs to support these incredible pioneers all over the world, and dozens of new projects and enterprises have started. There is a strong network of climate literate creators dedicating their lives to change. Currently, Julie's Bicycle is researching international arts policies with arts councils and government ministries and jointly curating global roundtables with partners on every continent. In fact, 3 weeks ago, we ran a fantastic roundtable with partners Uclg here in Turkey. These are interrogating what is happening on the ground with artists and creative industries and what enabling frameworks are needed by policymakers, by funders, which will really support and strengthen them. These findings will be presented at the pre-COP in Milan in 3 weeks' time and also at COP26. We want communities outside culture to appreciate culture, but culture itself and the creative industries need to change first. One thing we are sure of: the creative climate movement is mobilized. We have all the knowledge, the tools, the resources, and the people to do this incredible work, but it desperately needs you to take action. We all have a responsibility to seek this movement out, recognize it, strengthen it, and celebrate it with all our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison, for this activating speech and for sharing your experience at Julie's Bicycle. And thank you very much indeed to everyone that's taken part in the session and everyone that has been following it online. And hopefully that activating message is one of those that we'll leave as a legacy for this session, and knowing that there's a lot that needs to go on. Just a couple of elements as takeoffs, but I think there's many more that have been suggested. But among other things, let's remind the fact that the Climate Heritage Network will be launching its sign-on manifesto next week with a view to the COP26, and that there's the forthcoming report on the role of culture in climate resilient development to be published soon by Uclg and the Climate Heritage Network. And there's much more to come with a view to COP26. So stay tuned, let's follow it. Thanks everyone who stayed here. Sorry for not being able to give time for questions, but I think it's very late. Same for the people in the audience, but anyway, thanks for being here. And yeah, have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.